Impulsan en nuestra vida cotidiana. Desde las baterías de vehículos eléctricos, pasando por los colores de nuestros celulares, hasta las armas militares más avanzadas. Las tierras raras y los minerales críticos están en el corazón de nuestra vida moderna. En este informe especial analizamos lo que significa para nosotros el dominio ganado por China sobre las tierras raras en el mundo, el impacto que esto tiene en todos los sectores de la sociedad, desde lo civil hasta la defensa, y qué puede hacer Estados Unidos para revertir esta tendencia. Bienvenidos a China en Foco, mi nombre es Julián Bertone. Tierras raras y minerales críticos se encuentran en la parte inferior de la tabla periódica, pero en términos de importancia actual están en la cima de todo.
The rare earth minerals is one of the saddest stories in American history. We did not want to be dependent on China for rare earth minerals because they are defense critical, and our best minds, our best and brightest people decided that if we had a war with China, they may not sell us rare earth minerals to make weapons out of. It's possible. So we opened up the rare earth mineral mine in the United States, but the processing is still being done in China. So we're actually extracting minerals here and sending them to China for processing.
La defensa es un área donde los minerales de tierras raras son cruciales. Pero antes de entrar en materia, ¿qué son exactamente los minerales de tierras raras y por qué son tan importantes?
So rare earths are a number of different elements. If you remember your chemistry class, you had the periodic table of elements and helium, hydrogen, oxygen, etc. So as chemistry has evolved over the last few hundred years, we've added more and more. And so there are a number of them that are actually at the bottom of the periodic table. And they have these very unique characteristics that allow the technologies now that we rely on to actually happen. They can handle heat better. They are more malleable. They perform different properties in terms of being able to do lasers or provide color.
Esta es Ann Bridges, una autora de Silicon Valley. Formando un conjunto de 17 elementos metálicos, las tierras raras se utilizan en todo, desde baterías hasta aviones de combate, discos duros de ordenadores y coches híbridos. Y eso en combinación con minerales críticos como el cobre, el litio, el níquel, el cobalto y otros. Bridges señala la cantidad de usos que tienen.
It's a breadth of applications. It's basically any technology that you are using these days has them in them.
Teniendo en cuenta todos los usos diferentes, ¿cuál es la preocupación?
The issue really is that while they are scattered around the world, which is what you'll hear, they're everywhere, they are in such tiny proportions. It would be like going to the beach and looking for them among all the sand. It's just very, very tiny. So the way they are gathered up is if you have a commitment to mining. And the U.S. used to do that. We mined iron ore, right? Our steel mills sucked it up. Detroit, Minnesota, Chicago. They are wholly reliant on the steel industry, which started with iron. So we dug up iron, and then a byproduct of that was the rare earths, because now all of a sudden you could capture them and process them in enough quantities to make them valuable.
Durante la Guerra Fría, Estados Unidos fue el líder mundial en tierras raras y minerales críticos. Pero desde entonces se dio el título a un enemigo e incluso lo ayudó a conseguirlo.
I think the other area that needs to be considered fairly is that as China pulled themselves out of the economic doldrums of the 50s and 60s, they created a dual-use concept for technology, that they would develop technology for commercial use, but then also use it for the military. And I think that sounded very attractive to many politicians. After the Cold War, we thought we'd never, have to worry about it again. So isn't that a great idea? So having China be the supplier of that technology, we weren't at war with them. We didn't think there was any threat. We were trying to, in fact, give them a hand up so that they could join and be a good trading partner and open up their markets. It seemed like a win-win.
Pero fue una victoria para todos.
That we can't build a future that's made in America if we ourselves are dependent on China for the materials that power the products of today and tomorrow.
I can't imagine what the affidavit would say to justify a seizure that broad.
there was essentially nothing in the body of this very classified document that gave any evidence that Trump was a Russian asset.
That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
All of these documents I'm taking are declassified. I mean, this is not some bureaucratic process.
I don't even know why that was necessary. I think it's just part of the tactics to try to increase pressure on those around President Trump.
My colleague, Peter Navarro, is arrested on a misdemeanor by an FBI SWAT team at Reagan Airport.
On January 25th, 2019, 29 fully SWAT-clad FBI agents who arrived in 17 armored vehicles with a government helicopter overhead and 2 FBI boats pulling up to the dock behind my house. I gather the purpose of this was intimidation.
Donald Trump, as a human being, as a man who is now a politician, is not owned by anybody. And that's what makes him very dangerous. He is lethal to the vested interests in this city, left and right.
Ahora mismo China es el único país capaz de producir todos los minerales conocidos de tierras raras. También es el país con la mayor reserva de tierras raras del mundo. El representante de Minnesota, Pete Stauber, dice que lo que empeora la situación es que Estados Unidos podría ser independiente de estos minerales críticos.
Well, I think it's unfortunate that this administration has put their dependency for both critical minerals and rare earth minerals in the hands of the communist country of China and Russia. It's simply unacceptable when we have the critical minerals and a few of the rare earths right here in the United States. This administration just won't let us mine these. We have the best environmental standards, best labor standards, and the opportunity to secure our supply chain dependency and put the destiny of our great nation in the palm of our own hands and not rely on, foreign adversarial nations that don't have our best interests at heart.
Entonces, ¿qué significa esa dependencia global de China?
If today the communist country of China stopped selling us their critical and rare earth minerals, we would be in deep trouble from our national defense to our manufacturing across the globe.
Bridges añade que de hecho ya estamos sintiendo los efectos de China.
Life doesn't always work out the way we envision it, and the whole world is now reliant on single source, certainly single locale regions in the world to supply certain things. And even today, I don't know if you saw this, the lithium plants in China have been closed down for a period of time because of the extreme drought. There's no more hydropower or not enough to run these factories.
Pero sobre los problemas de la cadena de suministro se cierne otra amenaza, la guerra. Tras la guerra de Rusia contra Ucrania, muchos volvieron su mirada hacia China para ver si Xi Jinping se apoya en Putin para ir por Taiwán. Aunque Taiwán es una isla gobernada democráticamente que nunca fue gobernada por el régimen comunista chino, el partido la considera como parte de su propio territorio y amenaza con recuperarla por la fuerza si es necesario. Tras la visita de la presidenta de la Cámara de Representantes de Estados Unidos, Nancy Pelosi, a Taiwán, Beijing intensificó su retórica agresiva hacia la isla, lo que hace temer a algunos que la situación se convierta en un conflicto bélico. Pero si eso ocurriera, ¿qué significaría en términos armamentísticos y de la dependencia de Estados Unidos hacia China para los minerales de tierras raras? El analista económico de China, Antonio Gracefo, señala lo siguiente.
This is the problem. If we had a war with China, I said it tongue-in-cheek before, but seriously, if we have a war with China, they're not going to sell us materials that we need to make weapons. So we will have a shortage of these materials. And there's also really scary things like pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceutical inputs come from China. And if there's a war, they'll just stop. And people that are dependent on certain medicines, might die, initially, until we can figure out how to produce them here. So this is a lot of why a lot of, congressional representatives, a lot of journalists, a lot of people who speak out are saying, please, we need to decouple from China. We need to move our supply chains out of China, diversify supply chains, reshore manufacturing for these critical things like pharmaceuticals and defense critical materials.
Y es que estos elementos son el corazón de muchas tecnologías críticas de las que depende el Departamento de Defensa, desde láseres hasta armas guiadas de precisión, entre otras. Bridges añade que China tiene un historial de uso de las tierras raras como palanca de extorsión o castigo en tiempos de disputas.
We saw a little bit of this in 2010. Japan and China actually had a conflict over rare earths specifically, and China responded by cutting off Japan's access to the rare earths, which really had an impact on on Japan's manufacturing capabilities. So it is not outside of the scope of the imagination to believe that in a time of warfare, indeed, China would leverage this kind of power they have. And let me just give you some numbers. We're talking about, while only 60% these days of the mining of rare earths happens on Chinese land, they are importing quite a bit from Africa, from South America, a lot of the islands around the Asian Pacific. So they have consolidated a processing function for the industry, and then they purify it, they refine it, and they make it into the metals and the magnets and the alloys that then feed into their manufacturing plant. So when we say, well, they may just cut off rare earths, can't we just dig them up ourselves? It's not just that, it's the entire process to take it from rare earths to the finished product.
Dada la importancia de estos elementos, ¿cómo llegó Estados Unidos a donde está?
Some of these processing, I mean, if you trace the history of why it wound up in China, a lot of it is because of pollution standards. You know, in Europe, it would be impossible to do these things in Europe, and then the U.S. has strict standards, but not quite as strict as Europe, and then China has much lower standards. So a lot of things do get sent to China, and it costs so much money to start it up that once it's established anywhere in the world, it is very difficult to start it somewhere else in the world because the initial investment is so expensive when you could just send it to China, and get it done.
Entonces, con el actual impulso a la protección del medio ambiente y la energía limpia, ¿hay alguna manera de lograr un equilibrio entre ambos?
There needs to be certainty in the process. There needs to be, standards at every point within the process. And you can't move those standards, or for another term, you can't move the goalposts during the process. Like we've seen in so many areas of this country and so many projects, the project has met the specific standards and they move the goalposts. So you're looking at certainty is needed, and then you have to make sure that the workforce is there. And in the United States of America and northeastern Minnesota, I can tell you we have the workforce to mine these critical and rare earth minerals without question.
Bridges señala que históricamente la legislación pretendía hacer ambas cosas.
The 1970s was an era of a lot of the environmental protection agencies being set up. But in 1980, there was actually a law that was passed and signed by President Reagan that required that any environmental protection be balanced with the productivity of our country. And that's kind of been ignored and shoved aside and not referenced very much. But it is a very key portion because, in essence, what has happened now over the last few decades is the concept of environmental protection has meant protect the land at all costs, stay off of it, do not touch it, do not damage it, do not even, dare to think about using a portion of it on behalf of the American citizens. So simultaneously, corporations got tired of the lawsuits and the liabilities and fighting, not just the federal level, but the states have their own environmental laws as well, and then every local region and city, county, et cetera, has stakeholders now that can weigh in and stop a project. So it literally takes 10 to 20 years to get a project approved, maybe. And the private enterprise just said, never mind, we'll go find the least cost provider.
Estados Unidos tomó medidas para reducir esa dependencia económica. El Departamento de Defensa adjudicó recientemente a la empresa minera MP Materials un contrato de $35 millones. Es para construir una nueva planta de procesamiento. MP controla la única mina de tierras raras de Estados Unidos, pero la empresa sigue dependiendo de China para su procesamiento. Para hacer frente a las preocupaciones medioambientales, la Casa Blanca dijo que formaría un comité para recomendar cambios en la Ley de Minería de 1872. La norma rige la minería de roca dura en gran parte de Estados Unidos desde el siglo XIX. El congresista Stauber dice que se empieza por un cambio de mentalidad.
Well, first off, number one, you have to have the political will to mine and process in the United States. You have to have the investment, and there's something called the NEPA process. We have to reform the NEPA process so we can process here and reshore our manufacturing here. We have a mine, for instance, in northeastern Minnesota that's entering its 20th year of permitting. 20 years, and by the way, in the same watershed in the country of Canada, they opened a gold mine within 3 years. And so we have to make sure that the NEPA process, the reforms are transparent and allow these manufacturing and processing facilities to move forward in a timely fashion.
Y Bridges amplía la información.
Personally and professionally, I would say the mindset has to change that the government can do it all. What the government can do with the Department of Defense and the Department of Transportation is issue purchase orders. Say, we want to buy X number of magnets, okay? Or I think what they're trying to do with the U.S. Postal Service is say, buy electric Jeeps. Fine, put a purchase order. Say, this is how much money we're contracting for. You would be surprised when there's guaranteed money by a date certain, how quickly business people calculate what it's going to take, and they'll either make it happen or they'll find someone who will, and it will happen.
El congresista Stauber dice que Estados Unidos tiene los recursos y la mano de obra listos y dispuestos para apuntalar la defensa de la nación.
80% of this nation's steel is made because of the iron ore mined in northeastern Minnesota, and it's called the Iron Range. Right now, the Duluth complex has the critical minerals in our northeastern Minnesota area. It holds 95% of the nation's nickel reserves, 88% of the cobalt reserves, and over a third of the copper and other platinum group metals that we use every single day. And this administration, for purely political reasons, pulled the leases from that company, wouldn't even allow that company to go through the highest environmental impact statement. And that's unacceptable. Unacceptable. We have the workforce that is ready, able, and willing to mine those minerals that we need and that we use every single day, and really help for the strategic national security.
This is the modern day version of Watergate.
I'm not worried about any of it. Donald Trump didn't commit a crime.
That threat against those of us who are standing up for our country, standing up for our freedoms, they want the rest of America to know we're going to go after these guys. And so if we can go after these guys, we're coming after you. And, you're next.
Bridges señala lo que podría lograrse si se ponen en marcha esas regulaciones y cuando el gobierno y las empresas privadas trabajen juntos.
Well, I think one major thing all the governments could do is get the regulations out of the way. We saw with COVID when it hit, when President Trump used the Defense Production Act, we were able to switch some factories around overnight. The private industry was willing to, in essence, go on war footing to help deliver, and we delivered in record time. I think even I was amazed at some of the things we were able to do. But that shows that we have the expertise in the private sector. We do not have it in the public sector.
Pero si no se toman medidas y si Estados Unidos sigue dependiendo de un adversario, el futuro es bastante sombrío.
The consequences will be devastating for our nation. We will be relying on adversarial nations and other nations for these rare earth and critical minerals. And it doesn't have to be this way. We must have an administration that understands the importance of securing our critical minerals and our rare earth minerals. We have to return in this country, the United States of America, to mining and mineral dominance. And we can do that if we have the political will.
Pero no es solo una visión política, es toda nuestra visión del mundo. Bridges advierte que podríamos estar preparándonos para perder.
I think we need to be very careful about how we accept kind of a single worldview, whether it's coming from communist China, whether it's coming from the World Economic Forum. We are so interconnected now that a bad piece of information is creating a knee-jerk reaction that's whiplashed around the world. We saw that with COVID. We're seeing it now with the electric vehicles. They're fine, for people who want to buy them, fine. But why are we coercing people to buy them? Why are we forcing the people out of certain other choices? America was always known for having the most choices, and we are now taking those choices away. Why? In order to conform to what China wants? That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Como señalan los expertos, Estados Unidos está en una encrucijada. Tiene la capacidad de ser autosuficiente, los recursos necesarios para hacer funcionar la vida cotidiana y aumentar sus defensas, pero si sigue dependiendo de un adversario para sus elementos críticos, seguirá estando a merced de los caprichos de otra nación, una que no tiene los mejores intereses en mente. Y eso es todo por hoy. Gracias por acompañarnos y nos vemos la próxima.